What happened on Wednesday? Everybody knows what happened on Wednesday, right? You've seen the news, you've seen the, YouTube and all of that in Minnesota and in the Twin Cities. There was a nice regular checkup looking for immigrants that were illegal. And there was this woman by the name of Renee Good who probably told them off. This is what I'm guessing. Probably told them off. And then you see a video of her car just taking off. And one of the agents gunned her down. 3 shots, you can hear them, 3 shots. In fact, one of his colleagues, a female colleague, an ICE colleague, ran to the car, because then the car crashed, and says, "What did you do?" You could hear that. Now, how is this interpreted? The federal government says this is her fault. She tried to run over the ICE agency. But when you watch the video, you don't get that impression at all. You think that actually she's trying to get away. Now, the agent, one other agent, said to open the door, and she refused to do that. But is it worth killing her? So, the federal government is blaming the lady. The local government is blaming ICE, and everybody is like this. And this illustrates where we are today. Civil conversations, when we do not agree with one another, have almost been, out of the wayside. For the last 8 or 10 years, we have been having a country that is very different than the one we used to have. And it's difficult to have any conversation with anybody who doesn't agree with you full 100%. This is at the highest level. And one of the reasons is that lying has become endemic. And lying is something that is a practice that now people are starting to believe lying is normal part of a conversation, even though it shouldn't be. What is a thoughtful Christian to do when faced with political pandemonium? And that's really a strong word, but it is political pandemonium. And many other countries don't know what to do with us anymore because of that type of thing. We cannot ignore this. The Bible makes clear that politics, and this is the reason why I'm bringing this up to us, the Bible makes clear that politics will play a progressively pivotal role in the end of time. So this is coming, and we have now the seeds that are bearing fruit for the attitude aspect of it. The prophet Daniel was no stranger to political pandemonium. He was experienced in serving in public service, in dealing with very difficult issues, because he himself, his worldview was different than all of the other nations that he served under. How did he do it? So we're going to learn 4 key lessons today about Daniel's behavior that can be very useful to us. Let's begin. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, to be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. Now, this is very common in the ancient Near East. Everybody stole from everybody else. And so the king said, I'm going to put people in charge to watch these people who steal. Obviously, he didn't trust those 120 satraps who were working for him in government, so he put these 3 people on top of that. But listen to what it says next. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps because, what? An excellent spirit was in him, and the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. In other words, this is the only guy that won't steal from me. So I'm going to put him in charge over the governors, the other two governors, and over the 120 satraps, so that we have, I can trust somebody. So the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. You see how typical, and you tell me if that is not a reflection of politics today. In other words, you want to do something good? Okay, we're going to turn it around and make it work against you. So these guys say, okay, so you want to keep the accounts fair and clean? Okay, then we're gonna have to nail this guy. He's the only good one, but we're going to have to nail him. But they could find, this is a beautiful statement, may it be said of each one of us. They could find no charge or fault because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found in him. Wow! No wonder Darius said, I want this guy. Now, he got him out of retirement. Daniel was already in his 80s. And this is the amazing thing. He is asking Daniel, who is not a Medo-Persian, he is not a Babylonian, he is a Jew. He has a completely different worldview. He has a worldview that says, your gods are bad news. That's the kind of worldview that Daniel belonged to. And in spite of that, he says, yes, he may say that, but the truth is, this is the only guy I can trust. What a remarkable thing. What a remarkable life, that of Daniel. Then these men said, we shall not find any charge against this Daniel. I mean, there's no fault. This guy is squeaky clean. Unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Okay, we're going to use that and twist it and make it work on our behalf. Darius does the unthinkable. He calls on one of the conquered empire's political leaders to run his empire. Who does that? In the ancient Near East, whenever there was a new government that rose to power, typically they would simply eliminate everybody else who was in power before. That was the easiest, and that is from culture to culture to culture to nation. It was not unique at all. But this guy is asking Daniel, because of his reputation, because he had been serving other kings for decades with distinction. Daniel was not a Mede. He was not a Persian. He was not even a Babylonian. His worldview was very different from those of these nations. But he was evaluated based on the big C. What's the big C? Character. On his character. On the essence of the man. So lesson 1. Good citizenship does not guarantee freedom from persecution. I mean, he had been doing it well for decades. But these people, now he has very powerful enemies. Why? Did he do anything wrong? He didn't do anything wrong. But that's what happens with the devil at work. You don't need to do anything wrong to get you. You may be doing everything right. Look at Jesus himself. So being and doing good, and this is the important message to us as Christians, being and doing good in this politically upheaval environment in which we live must transcend politics. It's not a Democratic thing, it's not a Republican thing, it's not an independent thing, it's a Christian thing. Daniel had seen what bad government led to in his own country when he was a teenager. He saw how those kings defied God and wouldn't listen to the prophets and ended up messing up so greatly that the whole nation was taken over by the Babylonians in captivity for 70 years. And now 120 satraps and 2 overseers are gunning for him. Just him, because he is the only righteous man in the kingdom. But he doesn't complain. He doesn't complain. He doesn't refuse to serve either. He doesn't make demands. Well, if you want me, I mean, he is really sought after. The king wants him to be in charge of the kingdom. He could have come up with all kinds of demands. Well, if you know, I'm going to have a lot of enemies, so you're going to have to give me power to do this and that. No. He doesn't make any demands. He serves with integrity. Why? Because Daniel is not really serving Darius primarily. Who is he serving? God. He's serving God. What matters to him is, what does God think about my service? Do we do the same today? Too many Christians, when they disagree, become abusive and disrespectful, which is the tone of the political day, the political situation today. Social media becomes the pathway for scornful, belittling comments. I mean, terrible comments. Offensive to the core. Many times ignorant comments. And this is the greatest nation in the world. People in lesser, quote-unquote, countries must wonder about us and say, what is happening with the United States of America? Wasn't this the beacon of liberty and freedom and justice and fairness and equality? Jesus says, I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you, and pray for those who spitefully use you. Now, that is a challenge, isn't it? But what Jesus is saying is, those who follow me, are going to be different. And they're going to be different in part of how they treat each other. They're going to be radically different. Loving your enemy, blessing those who curse you, genuinely from the heart, blessing those who curse you. Now that takes the Spirit of the living God in you to do that. So back to our story. So these governors and satraps thronged before the king and said thus to him, King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom and the administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors, obviously not all, because Daniel was not part of that, have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days except you, O king, you are the one, shall be cast into the den of lions. So the specific punishment was very clear. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. Therefore, King Darius signed the written decree. What's wrong with that dude? Well, what's wrong is that he was flattered to the maximum. It's like, we're going to consider you like God. You see why getting too much power is really dangerous? Because you start believing it. You start believing it. And we have a situation when somebody has started believing it. Imagine. So this is the second lesson. State-informed religious observance guarantees persecution. Guarantees persecution. Because it's inevitable. If you do not do what the state says, you're going to be forced to do it. You're going to be compelled to do it. And that's one thing the state does have that the rest of us do not have, which is the force of power. Christians must stand guard on behalf of religious freedom. There is a reason why we believe in religious liberty. We believe in religious liberty not just for Seventh-day Adventists. We believe in religious liberty for Muslims. We believe in religious liberty for people who worship in weird ways. We believe in the freedom that every American has to honor God in the way that they choose to do so. That is what the founding fathers expected in how this nation was founded. Can you imagine if such a law that Darius signed were to be signed today in our nation? You may say, maybe we're not that far from that. And others have said, no, that's ridiculous. Nobody's going to write a law that says, worship me. Well, it may be, but it would cause a lot of upheaval because some people are going to believe, yes, we should. When a government uses the rule of law to enforce religious practice, either by stopping religious observance or by enforcing religious observance, it leads to discord, rebellion, and ultimately persecution. And that is guaranteed all throughout history. Thomas Jefferson was the one that coined that phrase, a wall of separation between church and state. He's the one that came up with that metaphor. And how he came out with that metaphor in a letter he wrote to Baptists from Connecticut in 1802, a wall of separation between church and state, to express what? The widely held belief at that time that the government should establish no particular religion or faith, but protect religious freedom for all. Now, we as a denomination, as a church, we believe that just as firmly as Jefferson believed it in 1802 and John Adams believed it in 1799 and in other founding fathers. But fewer and fewer Christians believe that. Many Christians believe that we need to use the state now to force good morality, biblical morality. I'll talk about that in a minute. So, a disturbing number of Christians are having second thoughts about the wall of separation between church and state. For example, the decline of sexual morality, and that is a clear problem in our nation. And it happens in our schools, it happens in the media, it happens in the daily discourse. It is rather an abomination, and I imagine God closing His eyes and His ears about what is going on many times. The problem is how we try to fix this. How do we try to fix this? Well, many Christians believe drastic measures must be taken to stop that. But the problem is that this must be done by the state. Drastic measures, in other words, if the state forces schools and the state forces situations so that they bar certain things or they encourage other things, that's the way you're going to do it. But is that the way you're going to do it? Is that the way to solve character flaws? No. We still, have you noticed this? We still want to do what we want to do. Right? And this reminds me of the text in Revelation about the beast and about the image of the beast. Listen carefully. He deceives those who dwell on the earth, the beast, and the image of the beast. And I know we don't have time to do a study on what the image of the beast is, but trust me, the image of the beast is a reference in the book of Revelation about the United States. The image of the beast, the lamb-like beast of Revelation chapter 13, verse 11, that is the United States. Should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So, and he causes, in other words, this is force. It's causing, it's not suggesting, it's not leading, it's causing. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand and on their foreheads. And that's the famous mark of the beast. That no one, so this enforcement, this spiritual enforcement will affect us economically, that no one may buy or sell, except one who has the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. So the mark of the beast is being effected by our nation, not right now, but in the near future, because with the idea of correcting the wrongs of the nation. We need to fix our American psyche. We need to become more Christian. We need to be more biblical, so we're going to force that to happen. And many Christians are going to be behind that. And many churches are going to be behind that too. They say, yes, we need to do it. Well, you know what that reflects? That reflects our failure in terms of the Great Commission. It reflects the fact that if we are deeding this to the state, it's because we have failed to make it happen. In other words, we have failed to influence our neighbors and our friends and our family members to become more Christian. So we appeal to the state to make us more Christian. Christians have historically formed an indispensable part of the conscience of our nation. Absolutely. Praying and working for its protection and success. But it doesn't stop there. We should continue to do this, but by all appropriate means. And appropriate means does not include the use of force. It does not include the forcible conviction that we should do certain things. We must remember three things, and the first one's going to come as a shock to some who had never thought about this. Number one, America was never founded as a Christian nation. Oh yeah, we have Christian concepts and Christian ideas, and many people came to America to flee from persecution in other countries, Christians who fled. But most of the founding fathers were deists. They were not Christians. Look at them. All right? So Thomas Jefferson was a rabid deist. James Madison was too. John Adams was too. Benjamin Franklin was also. None of these were Christian. George Washington is suspect. He went to church, he attended church, but he never took communion because he didn't want to, so he didn't accept a Jesus who had died for him. So the concepts that these guys wrote about and the legal basis about our nation is not necessarily a Christian nation. They believed in the supreme being who created the universe but did not intervene in human affairs. In other words, they did not believe in a personal God who knows you and loves you and wants you to change. They relied on human reason and natural law. That's natural law. In other words, what makes sense, okay? And they rejected religious dogma, miracles, and revealed religion. That's why the Constitution is a classic deist document. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that's very deist, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that's very deist, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that's also very deist. If it were more Christian, that last statement would probably sound differently. John Adams is the second president of the United States. And he wrote in the Treaty of Tripoli, this famous Article 11, the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Why did he say that so categorically? Because they were having trouble, commercial ships were having trouble in the Mediterranean. They were being seized by northern African rogue nations, pirating nations. And so they had to do something about it. They got together and they said, okay, we're going to agree to do this. And so this treaty came out. But one of the things that the Americans wanted to ensure these northern African nations was, we're not going to fight you because we don't like Muslims. That's not the reason. We are not a Christian crusading country. That's what they wanted to say. Number two, we must remember that lasting positive change comes through evangelism and discipleship, not through politics or government programs. You can get better in some ways, but lasting change comes through a change of heart. It's the work of the Holy Spirit, not the work of the government. Some government programs are good, and we should support them, especially the closer I get to retirement. But the government relies on the force of law, which can never bring lasting transformation of the heart. It never does. It never will. Christ, however, does not force us. You see the difference here. Christ never forces you even to do the best thing, even to embrace life, even to embrace joy. He does not force you to do that. He invites you to do that. He invites you to surrender to Him. My son, give me your heart, give me your will in the Old Testament, and let your eyes observe my ways. Give me your heart. You must choose to release that to me. Come to me and I will give you rest. Come to me. I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to drag you. Come to me. I will give you rest. Abide in me. That's an invitation too. And I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. Please pay attention to what I'm saying. All the Old Testament prophecies to the Jews about God's counsel, it was all the same. Please do this. Please do this. Please listen to me. Please pay attention to me. Not, I'm going to make you do this. And if there is somebody who has power to make you do something, that would be God. And much greater power than the greatest nation that ever existed. The fact that so many Christians today are looking to use the power of the state to compel lasting societal change is a sign not of resourcefulness, but of failure. The failure to fulfill the Great Commission that leads people to become loving disciples of Jesus. It's saying we're not quite making it, so we're going to turn it over to the state to do it because the state has more compelling resources to make people good. And we must remember number 3, sinners, we may not like this, but sinners have rights, including the right to make bad decisions. And the Bible is a thorough manual about that. How God allows people to mess up. He keeps forgiving. He keeps pleading. But He keeps letting people mess up. He does not stop them from doing that. These rights have limitations, of course, when it comes to the government. One is not free to kill or to steal from others. And they're not free to promote immorality in Christian institutions, for example. That's why Christian institutions can be run differently than public institutions. But Christians must be careful to what extent they seek to enforce personal morality on other people. Religious liberty is liberty for all, not just for Christians, not just for Adventists. So maintaining a society that is sufficiently moral, this is the crux of the matter. Maintaining a society that is sufficiently moral to preserve the public peace while preserving citizens' rights to not be moral within constitutional limits is a balancing act like no other. That's tricky. And we understand that this takes some thinking and careful process So let's get back to our story. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home. And in his upper room, with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. What did Daniel do that was different from what he had done before? Nothing. Nothing. In other words, Daniel was sending a clear message, and the message is, look, there is somebody above you, above the government, that I need to pay attention to. I'm not going to skirt that relationship, and I'm not going to cut it down, and I'm not going to fake it. He could have just closed the windows. That's all he could have done. He could have prayed 3 times a day. He could have prayed 15 times that day. And nobody would have known it. But if he had done that, then he would know, he would be sending a wrong message. And the message is, now this is affecting me, and now I'm going to have to watch it. No. He was not willing to do that. He was only willing to follow God in the most important things. Now, this is not a Daniel who is provoking this. This is not a Daniel who is saying, okay, catch me if you can. This is a Daniel who is saying, I'm not going to change that because I know that is what matters most in my relationship with God. So lesson 3, when religious freedom is threatened, Christians must refuse to compromise on biblical principle and practice. But that doesn't happen as often as we may think. In 60, 70 years of Daniel's public service to government, he exercised civil disobedience once. Daniel knew full well the consequences of civil disobedience because it was written in the law. If you don't do this, you're going to go to the lion's den. He knew that. But that didn't matter to him as much as his connection with God mattered. Any variance to his practice would signal compromise. He kept doing what he always did. Now here's 2 caveats. 2 warnings. Being respectful of political leaders does not mean we never disagree with them. But we do so respectfully when we do. We do so not, we don't belittle them, we don't insult them, we do not, badmouth them. We do it respectfully. Secondly, civil disobedience should not be the goal. That should not be the goal. That is what we find many times in people who participate in protests, whether they are from the right or from the left. They think that this is the objective, civil disobedience. That's not the objective for the Christian, but a measure of last resort. That's what we need to think about. In 60 plus years of public service, Daniel exercised civil disobedience this one time. So Daniel's enemies acted swiftly as soon as they saw him. So it didn't need to go 30 days, just one day. The king finally caught on. You've got to be kidding. What a fool I am. That flattery was going to cost him the one person he could trust. So he couldn't sleep that night, but it's interesting what he said to Daniel before he tossed him into the lion's den. Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. Isn't that an amazing statement of faith? It's like, you're in good hands. I messed up, but you're in good hands. Isn't that wonderful? But that comes, somebody would say that when they see a very consistent life of faithfulness to God. Otherwise, they couldn't say that. And so here's Daniel in his 80s, chilling with the lions. I cannot imagine the smell, but I cannot imagine also how those lions who were hungry, most likely, just saw in this man, ooh, we can't touch that one. So the lions probably saw the angels around, and the angels said, keep your mouth shut. You like that, huh? O king, live forever. When the king came back the next day, my God, king, live forever. See, he doesn't say, you fool. You almost had him be killed. Don't you get it? You know, no. He says, O king, live forever. Respect. God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him, and also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. My conscience is clear, and I think you know that. The impact was immediate. The impact was immediate. The king wrote a letter. You know, he first of all those satraps and all these people who brought the charges against him, you know, he threw them into the lion's den, and they barely made it to the bottom. Secondly, he wrote a letter to all his vast kingdom, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed. It's talking about a personal God. The God of Daniel, he says, not just a God. The God of Daniel, and his dominion shall endure to the end. Listen to this. These two statements are echoes of Daniel chapter 2. And the stories just went through the decades that first vision about the kingdom of God knocking off all of the other kingdoms. There it is. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So lesson 4, the coming battle over religious freedom will be difficult, but it will also be the means of transformation for many, many people. Jesus is coming soon, but he's not going to come before the great last tribulation takes place, and before political upheaval turns this nation clearly upside down. And the nation we grew up to love, we will say, what in the world has happened to it? Well, the seeds of it are being planted right now. And we must let God work on our characters, just like Daniel did. Because we're not smart enough to fight against the state. We're not rich enough to do that. We're not well healed enough to do that. Only God can be with us in the process. And the truth of the matter is that it is not so much how we respond to the state, it's how we respond to God that really matters. Chaos is coming, but calmness is guaranteed with Jesus in our hearts. That's a simple statement, but it is, my friend, the truth.